Round Rock, Texas, just outside of Austin. An interestingly named road sits as part of the Brushy Creek Regional Trail System, going by the name Hairy Man Road. It was called this decades before the name was official, only appearing on maps as late as the 1980s. Reason being, as far back as the pioneer days, a certain someone has haunted that road and the woods around it for generations. He's been a cultural staple around those parts for years, but what makes it interesting is that this isn't a ghost we're talking about, but rather a man. It's a fascinating story, but an obscure one. The kind that you're more likely to discover if you happen to be passing by locally. All the same, it's a story told with a certain familiarity. Just how many Bigfoots, flying beasts, or famous hauntings plague these small American towns? Enough to fill an atlas, that much is sure. But when we focus on the Austin suburb of Round Rock, we get a one-of-a-kind folktale that seems to blur the line between man and beast. He's known as the Hairy Man, and he's exactly that, some kind of hermit or vagabond known for terrorizing the locals as far back as the 19th century. Published locally for years, the enigmatic Hairy Man was your run-of-the-mill old man of the mountain story, featuring some unkept hobo who didn't take too kindly to those who trespassed on what he called his property. What makes him so interesting, though, is the fact that even though his origins stretch back almost 2 centuries ago, some frightened residents have claimed that they still see him today. There are a few theories regarding how the Hairy Man came to be, but the most popular details a rumor about a young boy who was left behind by his own family. On a stormy evening at an unspecified time in the 1800s, a caravan of settlers found themselves trudging through the overbearing waters of flooded Brushy Creek. Sadly, while they crossed, the boy accidentally fell overboard and into the dangerously high water. With the settlers already barely holding on for dear life themselves, they made the decision to simply leave him there and keep going forward. And with this harsh decision made, the boy was left vulnerable to the elements, another victim to the way of life in the old frontier. Miraculously, however, this wasn't the end of the boy's story, rather, a new beginning of sorts. Instead of drowning, he was instead swept away further and further downstream until reaching land in the nearby woods. Woods that the unnamed boy would call home for the rest of his days. Although lucky to be alive, the boy was now alone, directionless. Whatever his life was meant to be with the settlers was now lost. And with nothing left but feelings of betrayal left to fester, the young man began his new life living completely out of spite and disdain for anyone who crossed him. As the years went on, his nomadic life in the woods left the boy, now a grown man, with an unsettling appearance, long hair, overgrown fingernails and toenails, and an overall wild look. Within the century, locals to Round Rock began reporting a series of strange happenings in the area that slowly started to solidify this odd legend. For one, the nearby farmers started reporting random livestock theft, and different people say they've had rocks thrown at them from the tree line. Most unique of them all, travelers crossing Brushy Creek would sometimes hear the sound of scratching coming from the tops of their wagons, only to figure out the culprit was the Hairy Man, dangling from the top of a low-hanging tree, using his elongated toenails to scrape the wooden roofs of their transports. A sort of petty insult to the same types of people who left him for dead all those years ago. This wasn't the only time the Round Rock Hairy Man utilized the wooded environment. Old reports say he swung from trees and vines with inhuman-like efficiency, reminiscent of characters like Tarzan. And when he wasn't chasing lone explorers that happened to tread on his edge of the wilderness, a legend persists to this day that blood-curdling howls can be heard emanating from the brush. One story speaks of a man named Jack the Jumper Holloway taking aim and firing a shot at the hairy man, but missing, quickly escaping back into the woods. This is one of the closer encounters documented with him. Now, just like no one knows the hairy man's origins, neither do they know how he met his demise. Ironically, the most popular theory is that when performing one of his toenail-scratching pranks atop a tree, the branch he'd been hanging on suddenly snapped, sending him falling directly in the path of one of the stagecoaches, which inevitably trampled him to death. If this was the case, the hairy man of Brushy Creek may have actually met his fate near the exact same spot he was left for dead when he was just a boy. Another theory says he drowned in yet another flood at Brushy Creek, unable to escape his fate a second time. However, despite this well-woven story, there's another, much more probable piece of evidence that may be responsible for the hairy man legend, this time with actual record to reference it. In 1891, the Austin American-Statesman published an article speaking of a man named George Cook showing up in the area with his 4 children. Why this was of any note? Mr. Cook and 3 of his children were covered, head to toe, in long, brown hair, about 4 inches in length. And even though today this condition is classified easily as hypertrichosis, the excessiveness of 4-inch long hair is notably remarkable, hence the public's reaction. Originally from Pennsylvania, Cook and his family came to the Austin area to work as farmers, peacefully and normally. This being the 1890s, the era of traveling freak shows was in full swing, and apparently George Cook was approached multiple times by various circuses and museums alike to exploit himself as an attraction, but he refused every time, citing that he just wanted to live with his family like everyone else. There are no parallels between George and the young man who fell off the wagon, but one can hypothesize he became the inspiration for a local rumor. So much so that the elaborate story about the hairy hermit in the woods was concocted. In the end, whatever the story was, the life of this old hermit seemed to mostly be a harmless one, at worst inspiring nightmarish tales by children's mothers to keep them from misbehaving. But putting aside the exact cause of his death, the real question is, why did people continue to see him? No one ever found the body of the hairy man, according to legend. No matter which way he did die, he seemed to have come back as something other than human. Taking in all we know from the original era of this tale, the possibility of an aggressive old recluse is more than fathomable. But the stories that persisted after his death tell of something similar, but also starkly different. Through the 20th century, the legend of the Round Rock Hairy Man seemed to evolve into something very reminiscent of your classic cryptid in the woods style of legend. The description changed. No longer was some feral man seen stalking through the trees, but rather a creature most would call a Sasquatch. Based on very scarce reporting, this creature stood at least 7 feet tall and was covered in hair, apparently still residing in Brushy Creek to this day. And exactly why the lines get blurred between the old hairy man and the new hairy man are the similarities in their actions towards unsuspecting passers. Because just like the man from the 1800s, the Bigfoot-type creature also had an affinity for throwing rocks and chasing people it deemed too close for comfort. But perhaps the most glaring similarity, just like the old hermits like to use his nails to scratch the tops of wagons, the creature does the exact same thing, but to cars. Obviously, with supposed sightings such as Bigfoot, the usual suspects such as escaped primates or even bears have entered the conversation. Some locals have even tried to summon the beast by parking their cars on Hairy Man Road and cutting off the lights in hopes of seeing him. But not much beyond secondhand accounts have been documented so far. In 2017, Round Rock's Park Department began posting photos of massive footprints in the area and putting them in circulation, it was a hoax, but it got people talking in the end. That aside, there have been reports of people's dogs barking at unknown hairy beings here and there, and even metal fence posts becoming unexplainably bent, as if something or someone was trying to get through. One of the most interesting accounts comes from Katerina Moreau, who one night came face to face with a large, shadowy being out that way while driving. She nearly hit the creature had she not swerved out of the way quick enough. Per Katerina's own account, the headlights of her own car failed to reveal even the smallest of its features. For now, the legend of the Hairy Man of Round Rock remains just that, a legend. So much so that he even has a festival every year in the city of Round Rock. Every October at Cat Hollow Park, the Hairy Man Festival takes place, featuring their signature Hairiest Man contest, where contestants showcase their best beards, body hair, and fursuits for a panel of judges, among other things like games, live music, and charity drives. The classic tale of the Hairy Man himself is retold there as well, reminding those of the enigmatic figure, real or not, who continues to haunt Round Rock to this day. And of course, with stories like these, it's hard to pinpoint the truth of any matter, if there's any truth at all. That begs the question, could there have been at one time a feral man stalking and terrifying travelers in Brushy Creek? And if not, is there some kind of hulking creature in his place?